But I mentioned some things in that sermon that we're going to talk about this evening from Ecclesiastes chapter 10, where Solomon talks about the weight of folly. And when we say the weight of folly, he mentions in this about a balance. You can put some things in a balance. And you could put a million good things in your life over here on one side of a balance, and that's just a tremendous amount of good, but a little bit of folly can outweigh that. A little bit of folly can destroy everything on this side. So we've got to be careful. So what is Solomon talking about? Well, Webster defines folly as a lack of good sense, foolishness, and in a sense not considering the consequences of words or actions. In other words, it's just saying things that, later we want to take them back, right? Or we do something, then later, oh, I wish I'd have never done that. But we all do that, we all go through that, but it's just the point of the folly of it, the emptiness of it. There are a lot of buildings that are built that are called somebody's folly. And they sit out maybe in the middle of nowhere, and they really have no use. They're just there. It's a folly. It serves no purpose. And that's what Solomon is talking about. But he tells us some important things here about little sins. Sometimes little sins that we don't even consider sins. So what's Solomon saying? Well, don't let folly ruin your reputation is what he starts off with. And that's in verses 1 through 3. We're going to look at them one at a time. Verse 1, dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. So little folly outweighs, see, that's that putting it in a balance, wisdom and honor. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. Now, a fly is a very small thing, and we don't know how many flies it is here, one or two, but he's got it plural, dead flies. How many flies does it take to cause this problem? Now, what do dead flies smell like? Well, they don't smell like anything, do they? It's not like an animal that's along the side of the road dead. Man, you know something's dead there. Or something crawls up under your house and dies. You got a problem. But flies, they just die and they just kind of go away. The spiders eventually get them, I guess. But there's really no smell involved with that. But that's not what Solomon's saying, is it? He doesn't say that the dead flies smell. He said the dead flies make the ointment smell. The dead flies somehow change the chemistry of the ointment or the perfume, the fragrance, whatever it is, and we would assume that it's talking about the compounds that were made that they would use for incense in worship. That the dead fly somehow changed that so that the ointment actually stinks because of the dead flies that are in there. They're inconsequential little things that make a big difference when you're talking about something like this perfume, and that's the point he's trying to get across to us. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1, Paul says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. And I believe that should be your spiritual service to God. The spiritual walk of life, it's how we live before God. Why? Well, it's because those sacrifices we make are supposed to be a sweet savor going up to the Lord. And that's the way the Bible talks about it. Do good works smell good and bad works smell bad? Well, apparently to God they do. And we even talk about things in that way, don't we? We'll say, that person stinks. And it's not because they got a smell to it, it's because of the way they act. Or that person's a stinker, or that person's got some troubles. We know and we understand it's about the character of life. We don't want to have a type of character of life where the little sins Those little inconsequential things that we might do and say ruin our reputation, first of all, as we're talking and interrelating with other people, but that they don't ruin our character before God. People often allow things like that to destroy their character. When people look at them, what's the worst thing a Christian can be called? It's hypocrite, isn't it? Hypocrite. And why? It's because typically, now sometimes people just throw it out there, oh, if that person's a Christian, they must be a hypocrite because they're a Christian. But no, they're a hypocrite because they claim to be a Christian, and look what they're doing, look what they're saying. And sometimes it is very inconsequential little things. But those things add up in our lives, so we've got to be careful about them. Reputation. Little things have big or great consequences. Put it in a balance. Folly's like poison, corrupting healthy tissue. How much poison does it take to kill a body? Doesn't take very much. Sometimes, when I worked in the coal mines, carbon monoxide, 1%, one breath by one man of 1% of carbon monoxide equals one death. That's not a whole lot, see, but it can occur, and it happens. So that's what I believe Solomon's talking about. Listen, it's harder to build a good reputation or character than it is to destroy a good reputation or character. It's so easy to destroy it. So Solomon says, don't let folly ruin your reputation. And secondly, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 2, a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. He's not talking about politics. Okay? He's not. He's talking in poetic symbolism here. And what he's saying is, which way is your heart leaning? Now, in poetic symbolism, the right hand, the right eye, the right foot, the right toe, all the things on the right are the good things, because you go to an orthopedic surgeon, what's he going to do? He's going to make your back or leg or arm or whatever right. Now, the word hetero means other. So, orthodox means right way of thinking. Heterodox means a wrong way of thinking. But it's kind of like, here's the ortho, the right, and here's the hetero, here's the wrong, or the left. It's just the way that language comes about and the way that they express things. Which way's our heart leaning? Is our heart leaning toward the right way? Is that where our desires, what we really want to do, is be right with God and be right with our fellow man? Or do we take a lax position and say, oh, it doesn't really matter if I have a right relationship with God. He'll save me anyhow. And again, it goes into sometimes the Calvinistic aspect that I believe is a false doctrine. Well, before you're born, God knows whether he's going to save you or not. So it doesn't really matter what we do. We're either going to heaven or we're going to hell, and there's nothing we can do about it. And see how false that even sounds. But yet there are people who fall for it because they don't really examine the doctrine to find out what it's all about and compare it to what the Bible says. The right is that which is worth our pursuit, our time, and our effort. It's God's way, and we might say that's the straight and narrow way, the straight gate and the narrow way. Because what happens at the wide gate and the broad way? See, there are many people that go on it, but they just don't know what they're doing. Well, some of them do. That's a choice that they make, but there's so many that just don't take the time to listen and find out what God would have them to do. So the left indicates weakness or total rejection of moral and ethical standards. Doesn't matter what I do. They're the ones typically who say, hey, you don't have the right to judge me. And they're right. We don't have the right to judge somebody and say, well, you can go to the bad place. But we have a right to judge and say, now how can I help that individual? What can I maybe do to try to get that person to see what's going on? Now, rarely do you find times when you can really help somebody, because most people don't want help. They really don't. And I think that's the fool's way. That's that indication of a rejection, or at least a weakness of moral and ethical standards. I want to do what I want to do. We talked about that this morning, didn't we? Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 3. Solomon says, even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense. And he says to everyone that he is a fool. Oh, it's like he puts a sign up, look at me, I'm a fool. Or he yells and shouts, look at me, I'm a fool. No, that's not what Solomon is saying. What he's saying is you watch people and their walk of life, you watch them as they're traveling, and you know whether they're a fool or not. You know whether they're a fool world-wise, okay? But you also, if you understand spiritual things, you understand that they're spiritual fools, that they have no concept that there's going to be a judgment someday, or they just don't care that there's going to be a judgment. Forrest Gump's mama used to say, what? Stupid is as stupid does. And that's how we know. We don't have to pry into somebody's life. We don't have to take, do a test on them, run an analysis on them. We begin to see it. So Jesus said, we speak and we act according to what's in our heart. And that's what Jesus said. What's on the inside, that's what comes out. It's not what goes into the belly that defiles a man. It's what comes out. What? Well, that's the actions and that's the words that we use. It'll tell whether we are spirit-wise or spirit-foolish. So we identify a fool, someone who works or practices folly, by his or her walk of life. So that takes care of the first part. Moving along pretty quickly, aren't we? Part number 2. Don't let evil rulers ruin your peace of mind. Don't let evil. They're going to be out there. We've talked about it before. Solomon's talked about it before. We've talked about it. Just expect the rulers to be evil. Expect civil government to be evil. Why? Our founding fathers expected it. That's why they divided up government so much, so that no one part should have absolute authority, because then what? Absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So here is Solomon's wisdom on this. Verse 10. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. What does it mean? Don't leave your place. In other words, don't get up and leave the room. No. Remember, the ruler, because he's the ruler, he has the right to judge you. He has the right to survey you and what you're doing, and he has the right to say something about it. So don't get upset about it. Well, it's like the boss at work, okay? Some leaders only accomplish things through terror. They don't accomplish much, do they? There's a picture that goes around on the internet, the difference between a manager and a leader. And a manager, the picture for that is there's a group of like Egyptian or slaves, probably Hebrew slaves, and there's an Egyptian sitting on a big block of stone, and they're pulling the stone, and he's got a whip and saying, pull, pull, pull. And then the leader, he's the one, he's out, he's in front of these people, and he's got a hold of the rope, and he said, come on, let's get this moved. So there's a difference between a boss or a manager and a leader. The Bible tells us we need to be leaders, not pushers, not shovers, not managers, not bosses, not monarchs, as some religions actually put things of that nature into place. So the hot-headed boss rules by fear. And such people really don't have self-control, no control over their own moods, their own temperament, their own words, or their own actions. Have you ever seen that? someone who is in authority over you. They don't have any self-control. Something goes wrong, what do? They start throwing things, breaking things. Well, that really helps a lot, doesn't it? That gets the job accomplished. No, it doesn't. And that's kind of the way leaders, rulers are at different times. So what do you do when you meet people like that? It's a challenge, isn't it? How do you deal with that at work? How do you deal with that in civil government? We're blessed to the degree that we don't have that problem so much in the United States. What if you lived in a Muslim country right now with evil rulers and telling you, don't you dare mention the name of Christ, and don't you dare go to worship? What is there, a church today in Egypt that was bombed? I think it was 120 people killed today. Yeah. Just, it's amazing. So what do? Well, only God can develop in us as individuals a gentle, quiet spirit to endure and help a person such as that. And sometimes they won't take the help. They won't see anything wrong. Sometimes you got to show them the way. Now, you think about Pharaoh, and I talked about Pharaoh this morning, didn't I? Who's the Lord that I should obey him? Let these people go. But remember, Joseph was dealing with a Pharaoh who was pretty much the same way, but the way Joseph interacted with him changed Pharaoh, that Pharaoh, till there arose a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. See, things changed a little bit. So you needed a person there like Joseph, and who was there? Well, it was Moses. But God had to really convince him to go back and just stand up and be firm. Okay? Moses didn't have to make any threats. All Moses had to do was say, this is what God says. Take the people out. All right. The second part of this, verses 5 through 7. Solomon says, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set at many high places, and the rich sit in low places. I've seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. What's he talking about here? Well, here's simply this. All leaders make errors. Some, however, make great errors. Okay. Did you ever work for a boss, and I say boss, manager, whatever, that didn't know their job? Somehow they got the job because of who they knew or something, and they really didn't know what they were doing, but they thought they knew everything about it. Well, you got to do it this way. Well, it's easier and more beneficial if we do it this way. Oh, you do it my way. And what was it? 30, 40 years ago, the book was written about, it's called the Peter Principle. The Peter Principle, okay? And it's where the people who are the least qualified are usually the ones who get promoted in positions. It's just, they can't do their job very well here, so we'll bump them up a little bit more and more. And so that's exactly what Solomon's talking about here, but he's talking about it in the sense of civil rulers. Who do kings put in positions? The people most qualified to do the jobs, or their friends? Their buddies. People who give them things, give them gifts, whatever. And in the United States, we used to have a patronage system. Remember that? Every time there was an election, what happened? Changed postmasters. Why? Because it used to be that was a patronage position. If the Republicans got voted out, well, that guy lost his position and a Democrat was put in there. It was just how things worked. Didn't matter if they were the most qualified and most efficient at doing the job. Okay? So we see it, but then we see it in business, we see it in industry, we see it everywhere. So a leader who puts people in big positions while the ones who are capable and competent end up being what we call the low man on the totem pole. So, Solomon notes the difference between princes who lead and make their nation great and those who lavish themselves with the wealth of the nation. And he does that in verses 16 and 17. Listen to this. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. So all these people who are appointed to these positions to get things done in the kingdom, they get up in the morning and what do? They start partying. They're feasting. Why? I don't care what gets done in the kingdom. I got the position. I got the king's ear. I don't have to worry. I part. And what happens to the kingdom? It crumbles. Look at verse 17. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength, and not for drunkenness. In other words, there's a time to relax, and there's a time to get together and have a meal, even with, but probably a time to party, but not the way they were doing it. I remember a few years ago, what agency was it where they had all the parties, and the guy, they got the picture of him in a hot tub in Las Vegas and stuff. You know, it's ridiculous what happens, because they get in those positions. Well, you can't get me out. Can't get me out of here. Say, I've got a secure job and I can do what I want to do, and I get all this big money and I take these trips and all. And the nation crumbles because they're serving themselves and not serving the people. Point number 3. Solomon's point number 3, I believe. Don't let shortcuts ruin your journey. See, all this stuff's about ruining things. Don't let shortcuts ruin your journey. Don't take a shortcut. C.S. Lewis says that the shortest way home is the long way around. There are no shortcuts to heaven. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of study. It takes diligent effort, and we've talked about that recently, haven't we? Verses 8 and 9. Solomon says, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and the serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. That's all poetic, isn't it? Not the way we typically see it, but in the Hebrew poetry, that's what it is. He's giving pictures of something, okay? But what he's trying to tell us is we reap what we sow. Well, how does that come about? All right, is the guy digging a pit for a cistern to catch water? Or is he digging a pit so somebody will fall in and he can rob them? We don't know. We would assume the latter, wouldn't we? He's got some evil intentions here. Is the person remodeling a wall? Or is he breaking through the wall to steal something on the inside? Remember, they had, much like adobe walls, right? You know, mud, plaster walls, break through and steal something, which is being talked about here. So we get the idea now, don't we? Quarrying stones, what? Ecclesiastes before, there's a time to pick up stones and a time to cast away stones, right? What's the general use going to be for that? And why are you splitting wood? Why are you splitting a log? Are you doing it to make a weapon? Or are you doing it for firewood? To keep your family warm? So there's a lot of things that go in here, and we've got to give it a little bit of thought and try to catch the context of it. So it could be that not playing by the rules can get you in trouble. But it can also be that playing by the rules gets you in trouble. You know what? I think Solomon's right. About anything we do is going to get us in trouble. So we got to learn to stay away from the folly and hurt ourselves. So what's he say? what Solomon wants to do. What's his remedy? There's the word we had this morning. Well, what's his remedy for this? Number one, well, let me go back. Go back. Come on. Come up there. We've got to go back to there. Don't let shortcuts ruin your journey. We reap what we sow. Okay? So sow the right thing. Be resourceful. What does that mean? Well, be a jack of all trades. Be a jack of all trades. Be able to do a little bit of everything. You don't have to be perfect. That's one of the hard things for a lot of people. You don't have to be perfect. It's all right to be average in some things. Maybe be a little better than average. We don't have to be perfect. We can try so hard to be perfect that we really miss the mark. MRT, right? We can try to be so perfect that we get it all wrong. But we need to be resourceful, a jack of all trades. Ecclesiastes 10 and 11. If the iron is blunt, we're talking about an axe, okay? And one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. But wisdom helps one to succeed. If you know that, how many times do you do that? I've got one more piece of wood to cut, to chop. I don't want to sharpen this axe right now, so it takes you twice as long to chop that one piece of wood as it normally would. Just take the time sharp. Or sharpen the chainsaw chain, whatever, do it. Sometimes you don't sharpen something, you could be hurt. It could come off of there and smack into your leg and give you a big gash or whatever. Wisdom helps one to succeed. Verse 11, if the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. What? What are you talking about? Well, think about it in this sense there in verse 11. You get an email that says that somebody wants to give you $50,000, just send them your bank account information. Yeah, that snake's going to come and bite you before the charm of that $50,000 is going to come into your bank account. So be a little bit wise, and that's a part of this resourcefulness. Okay, and take care of business. It's easy to think. It's easy to think yourself out of doing something too, isn't it? Verse 15, the toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. Well, what's he talking about? Well, not just in knowing the way to the city, but knowing the way to what we might call success or to happiness or the proper way of living. Productivity. What does the cable guy say? Get her done, right? And that's what we just get her done. It amazes me. I've worked in coal mines. I've worked a lot of different places, and people who just don't want to get the job done. Get it done. Yeah, it's all right to kind of dog it when you get the work done. There's some pleasure in it. You dog it and don't get the work done, you have to do 2 hours work in the last half hour. Something's not going to get done right. So just get her done. 18th verse. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Yeah, you didn't replace that nail on the shingle. What was that, a couple weeks ago? So ruined the inside of the house. Procrastination. Don't let things go. Get it done. Now, how many times we see that in the spiritual realm too? Okay. Number 4. Don't let foolish talk ruin your sanity. Foolish talk ruins my sanity? How in the world could foolish talk ruin my sanity? Listen to what he says, verse 12 and 13. Verse 12 first. The words of the wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. So be careful what you say. Say gracious things, right things, kind things, well-spoken things. Okay? One congregation I was at had a poster on the wall that says, be sure to use sweet words because later on you may have to eat them. Right? So make them sweet. Well, what does he mean by this consume? Well, it means to swallow up. To swallow the individual up. And who gets swallowed up is the person who uses the wrong types of words and language. Okay? What do you say when you talk to yourself? That's a psychology book, believe it or not. And the way we talk to ourselves, the way we talk about ourselves to ourselves, has a lot to deal with our psychology, our sanity, okay? There is a ghoulish danger when we start believing our own lies.
Amen.
So, I tell you a lie. I might have 100 good reasons for that. But it's still a lie, and it's wrong, and it's a sin. But what happens when I start believing my lies? That changes me, doesn't it? That changes me inside. It changes what I am, because I really am that hypocrite that we talked about. Give a fool enough rope, he'll eventually hang himself, say. So, the words of Shakespeare, from Macbeth, this above all, this is Polonius. Polonius, what I've seen of critics say of Polonius, he's always saying these things and none of them are right. None of them are right. So this really fools him. Because listen to this. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not be false to any man. If we're true to ourselves, we can't be false to other people. But if we're false, if we believe our own lies, we can't be true to anybody. That's where this danger comes in and ruining our sanity. We get consumed by it. Ecclesiastes 10:13, the beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. Be careful what you say. Be careful where you say it. Be careful how you say it. Tone and body language is the big thing about communication, not just the words, okay? And I know I'm not the world's greatest communicator. You know, I just like to stand here and just talk, okay? You got to have some facial expressions or whatever, but it's just not the words. So it's how we act. It's how we present it. Here, somebody said a first-class fool is an expert on every subject. Remember I talked about be a jack of all trades? You know, be able to do a little bit of everything, but we don't have to do it perfect. But have you ever met somebody that was an expert in every subject, no matter what it was? And he has the highest regard for his own opinion. He'll never learn anything, will he? Even experience won't teach him. When he does it his way and he fails, it's still, no. And what's the definition, the working man's definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's the type of person Solomon's talking about here. His foolishness turns to madness when he sees himself as the savior of the world and everybody needs to follow him. Like Adolf Hitler. What did he use? Words. Words. And the man almost took over the world with his madness. Think about it. And that's where Solomon is coming from. Ecclesiastes 10:20, the last verse, see? Because we've dealt with some of the other ones in the other verses, but even in your thoughts do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter. So So be careful what you say. Be careful who you're talking to, and be careful where you say it. Remember, a person quick to listen to gossip is usually just as quick to spread it and add more, and probably talk about you too, and gossip about you. So that's just some really good thoughts that are here that Solomon has for watch out, because a little folly can ruin our lives. A little folly can ruin our reputation. A little folly can lead to a lot of destruction in our lives. Hebrews 12:1. I like this to finish with. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Little things tend to stick to us more than big things, right? So, yeah, we've talked a lot about sin today. Solomon's talking about folly tonight. Let's pay attention to some of the smaller things in our lives. Some of those things that we think are inconsequential, but yet they can make such a big difference. Let's be aware of them and remember, even a little folly can lead to one's ruination. Thank you for your time and your attention. Lesson's yours. If you have need, let your request be made known as we stand and sing to you.